The smell hit him first, coppery and thick, like a butcher shop on a hot day. Carter didn't even need to open his eyes to know what it was. Blood. But this wasn't just a hunting accident or a bar brawl. This was bigger. He forced his eyelids open, the dim, flickering light from a busted generator barely illuminating the scene. His breath hitched. Before him, a hulking, four-legged creature with matted fur and razor-sharp claws lay in a mangled heap, its chest cavity torn wide open, organs spilling onto the dusty, hard-packed earth. Its eyes, still wide and glassy, stared blankly at nothing, reflecting the terror of its last moments. And standing over it, a young woman, barely out of her teens, her face splattered with gore, a primitive, blood-soaked spear clutched in her trembling hands. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her chest heaving, but her eyes, oh man, her eyes were alive with a primal, untamed ferocity Carter had rarely witnessed. It was a look that screamed, "I just killed this thing, and I'll kill you too if I have to." Beside her, a younger kid, maybe 10 or 11, was meticulously carving chunks of meat from the beast's flank with a surprisingly sharp stone knife, his face grim but focused. He looked up, meeting Carter's stunned gaze, and offered a half-smile, a smear of blood across his cheek. "Dinner's ready," he grunted, as if this was just Tuesday. Carter glanced around the makeshift camp. Huts fashioned from scavenged metal and canvas dotted the landscape. Beyond them, a massive, rusted hulk of what looked like a downed alien spacecraft lay half-buried, a testament to some forgotten conflict. This wasn't just a settlement, it was a fortress, built by people who knew how to survive, no matter the cost. His own team, scattered around him, looked just as bewildered. RLYX, usually so stoic, had his golden eyes wide, and his silvery quills were practically doing the Macarena with how fast they were rippling. Carter slowly pushed himself up, his muscles protesting from the rough landing. He felt a weird mix of respect and unease. These weren't the primitive humans the Zarai intelligence had described. These were predators. The kind that looked at a snarling beast and saw not a threat, but a meal. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Cosmic Conquerors channel. Before we start, I hope you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so that you receive all the new content, and also share the story with your friends so it reaches as many people as possible. And if you have a story, write it in the comments. Maybe we'll choose one to narrate in the next video. Let's start the story. Pay attention, because there's a small detail that might change your entire perspective and awareness of life. The planet designated Earth appeared, at first glance, unremarkable from their distant outpost. The crew of the HFY observed the blue-green orb spinning silently in the void. This world was the latest in a long list of systems catalogued by the Zarai, a race whose civilization was woven into peace and cooperation, where disputes dissolved in dialogue and prosperity flourished through mutual understanding. Captain Sela's crest of silvery quills rippled as she pored over the collected data. This was unlike any species her team had studied. Earth's sentient inhabitants, humans, as they called themselves, were an enigma. Their histories detailed a species that thrived in an environment driven by scarcity and hardship, their progress forged in a crucible of competition and, more curiously, predation. Predation. Stowe whispered, her voice carrying a touch of awe, as though tasting an exotic word. Her lieutenant, RLYX, turned to her, his golden eyes narrowing. They evolved by hunting each other. Their rise came through dominance rather than unity. He paused, his clawed fingers tapping nervously on the control console. "Captain, are we sure this is a wise course? We've never encountered beings who achieve apex status through predation." Captain Sela's quills flattened briefly in contemplation. She understood his hesitation. The Zarai were not only unfamiliar with this kind of evolution, they were unsettled by it. In Zarai history, survival had meant nurturing, not subjugating. Yet that very difference beckoned her forward. Earth was too complex, too perilously intriguing to ignore. "We proceed with care," she replied, her voice as calm as she could muster. "If humanity embodies competition, then we must show them cooperation. We will teach them as much as we learn." The plan was set. They would land discreetly in a sparsely populated area to limit exposure. And so, with a quiet hum of anti-grav engines, the Zarai vessel slipped past Earth's defensive satellites and descended into a vast, uninhabited valley. To Sela's surprise, her sensors immediately detected signs of a settlement nearby. And based on initial readings, It appeared that they had landed on territory claimed by a human faction known as Americans. Sela scanned her briefing files on the subgroup. Americans were renowned for their resilience, their near-mythical sense of independence and assertiveness. From a historical perspective, they seemed to embody the very essence of human competition. This was an unexpected layer, a faction among factions, a culture within a culture. "Prepare for first contact," she instructed, casting one last unreadable glance toward her team. As the Zarai emerged from the shadows of their craft, they caught sight of the Americans gathering near the edge of the valley. A handful of humans approached, each moving with an ease and confidence that seemed at odds with the primitive weapons slung over their shoulders. They wore camouflage clothing and exuded an air of practiced vigilance, as if each of them were more than ready for danger. A tall man with a sharp gaze and a square jaw stepped forward, flanked by two companions who mirrored his composure. Sela extended her palms, a customary Zarai gesture of peace. "Greetings, Earth-dwellers," she said, her voice resonating in measured tones. "I am Captain Tha of the Zarai Exploration Fleet. We come in search of knowledge and harmony." The human in the lead scrutinized her, his eyes flicking to her quills and then to her team, assessing their every movement. For a moment, he said nothing. She sensed an intensity in him that she had rarely felt, even among her own. "Captain Tha," he replied, his voice carrying the low, gravelly undertone of caution. "My name's Carter, and while I respect the idea of harmony, I'll need to know more about why you're here. You'll understand if we don't just take strangers at their word." His tone was polite, yet unmistakably firm, a line drawn in the sand. Stan nodded, recognizing the calculated restraint in his manner. Here was a man who was not only unafraid but who was also prepared. Perhaps this was what it meant to be an apex being. "We seek only to exchange knowledge," she replied, maintaining her calm. "We observed your world from afar and were intrigued by your unique development. How you forged a path through survival, not unlike the most formidable creatures on your planet." Carter's mouth quirked into a half-smile, though his eyes remained hard. "Survival's always been the name of the game," he said, a note of something steely in his voice. "I'm sure you've seen that much." Beside him, another human, slight of frame but with a gaze just as sharp, spoke up. "So, you watched us? Studied us like we're some kind of exhibit?" "Not exactly," Sala responded, her quills fluttering with discomfort. "But we did seek to understand. And it is our nature to explore, to learn from others, so that we may all benefit." The smaller human raised an eyebrow. "And did you come to any conclusions?" SNA hesitated. How could she convey the unease that gripped her people? The allure and the dread that humanity's predatory nature inspired? "We concluded that your species is formidable. Your tenacity is unparalleled," she answered, choosing her words with care. "And yet, among your people, there are those who appear even more resolute, unyielding." A murmur of acknowledgment passed through the Americans. Carter's gaze lingered on SNA, something dark and thoughtful passing over his features. "Formidable," he echoed. "Well, that's one way of putting it, but I think you're just beginning to see what that means." Suddenly, a strange, powerful energy crackled in the air, as if some primal understanding had been exchanged. The Zarai had come expecting curiosity, perhaps cooperation. Yet standing before Carter and his companions, Tha realized that humanity, and perhaps Americans most of all, did not simply live. They defended their existence fiercely. "We have much to discuss," Carter said, his tone softer yet no less unwavering. "But for now, I think it's best we know where we stand. And we'd like to know you're here in good faith." Sness straightened, feeling the weight of his words. "You have my word," she answered solemnly, "that we come in peace." Carter nodded, though the hardness in his eyes did not fade. "Then let's begin, Captain. But let's keep things transparent." As SNA held his gaze, she could sense the depth of what lay ahead. This first meeting had only scratched the surface, yet she felt as though she had glimpsed the heart of something immense, a force she had yet to fully understand. She found herself both exhilarated and, for the first time in years, just a little afraid. The Zarai had landed, indeed, but now, standing among humanity's apex faction, she wondered who was truly the explorer and who was the unknown. Inside the Zarai ship, Captain Snur replayed the interactions with the Americans on a large display screen, studying every movement, every expression, every measured pause. The humans they had met were unlike any being she had encountered before. Even among the Zarai, who had long since evolved past aggression, Salna could detect an ancient feeling creeping up, a mix of respect and trepidation. Her observations turned toward what humans called American culture, focusing on its history, legends, and military strategies. The more she uncovered, the more the distinct American mentality intrigued her. From the mythic tales of frontiers to the resilience showcased in periods of crisis, there was a theme of defiance, of pushing limits. "They were born in the crucible of competition," Salna murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "Captain, is it wise to analyze a single faction?" RLYX asked, his golden eyes flickering with uncertainty. He had witnessed her growing fascination with Americans and was beginning to share her curiosity, albeit with caution. "Wise," Stha echoed, her gaze still fixed on the screen. "Perhaps not. But if we are to understand humanity's true potential, we must understand the Americans. They represent an extreme, a peak of what humans are capable of. The ultimate test of any species lies in its apex members." RLYX inclined his head. Salna continued scrolling through the data. A phrase caught her attention: Second Amendment. With each word, her understanding of these humans shifted. Weapons, tools of conflict that the Zarai had long abandoned, were viewed by Americans not as a threat, but as symbols of individual strength and resilience. To Americans, preparation for conflict was woven into their cultural fabric. "Weapons as a right," RLWX remarked, his voice laced with bewilderment. "Their entire society has built defenses around the idea that power rests within every individual. It is remarkable." SNA felt a similar admiration, mingled with apprehension. To the Zarai, power had always been centralized in wisdom and knowledge. Yet these humans, especially the Americans, saw strength as something each person could wield, a kind of readiness that defined their survival instincts. For the Zarai, such attitudes were not only foreign, but potentially volatile. However, she sensed this mindset could only arise in a culture forged by both opportunity and threat. A soft alert interrupted their study. On the monitor, they saw Carter and his team moving through a nearby field, apparently engaged in some kind of drill. Snow watched, captivated, as they practiced tactical maneuvers with quiet precision. Their movements were calm, almost choreographed, with each member perfectly attuned to the other, as if operating with a single mind. "Let's observe," Stha instructed, her eyes narrowing in concentration. The Americans were conducting a simulated defense exercise. Carter moved swiftly, barking orders in a low tone that carried a sense of urgency but no panic. Each command was concise, specific. Every team member responded with fluidity. SNA marveled at the display. It was not simply discipline, but an unspoken understanding that allowed them to act as one. She wondered if this mentality was the core of their apex nature, a self-reliance sharpened by unity. As she observed, Carter signaled a halt, scanning the perimeter before turning his gaze toward the Zarai ship, as though sensing their presence even from afar. It was as if his instincts, honed by years of vigilance, could detect observation. For a moment, their eyes met through the glass of the ship's viewport. SNA held her breath, feeling an unsettling intensity. He gave a slight nod, acknowledging her, and then continued with his team. "They operate on a level that transcends simple tactics," she remarked. "There is a harmony here, a kind of balance between individual strength and collective purpose." RLYX's eyes widened. "Captain, they embody the Predator's focus. Each action is not just for survival, but for dominance." "Yes," she replied softly. "Americans are not only adapted to survive, they are adapted to prevail. It's a mindset that leaves no room for weakness." The next morning, SNA decided to speak directly with Carter, hoping to understand the foundation of this mentality. She approached him as he was inspecting a map with his team, tracing potential threat paths around their temporary encampment. He looked up, his expression calm but assessing. "Captain SNA," he greeted, his tone as steady as his gaze. "I see you've been observing." "I have," she replied, feeling the weight of his gaze. "We Zarai have long practiced peace and mutual progress, but your people's way of life offers a different lesson." Carter tilted his head, his eyes unreadable. And what lesson would that be? She paused, choosing her words carefully. Among our people, we have evolved past the need for competition. But your culture maintains a readiness, a resilience that seems almost instinctual. You value preparation for adversity, as if it were woven into your very identity. Carter gave a slight smile, though his eyes remained intense. You could say that. We don't expect a perfect world, Captain. We prepare for what we know could come. But you prepare not just to survive, Salna observed. You prepare to dominate. Carter's gaze sharpened. Dominance, control, call it what you want, but here we understand that survival often means not waiting for something to come to you. You move first. You take control. It's not just instinct, it's choice. SNA felt a chill as she absorbed his words. His attitude, so pragmatic and unwavering, struck her as alien yet undeniably effective. It dawned on her that this was a part of the American apex mindset, a deliberate decision to meet challenges head-on, to seize control rather than merely react. This is why you bear the label of apex, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Carter's half-smile returned, a hint of something dark flickering in his expression. Captain, in our world, the strongest isn't just the one who survives. It's the one who shapes survival to their own terms. Snan nodded, feeling an unfamiliar admiration tinged with weariness. She understood, perhaps, the reason why the Zarai had never evolved along such lines. They had embraced peace by avoiding the very impulses that Carter's people harnessed. But here, standing beside him, she felt the sheer force of a will sharpened by conflict, honed by purpose. Then I suppose we still have much to learn from each other, she said, meeting his gaze with newfound respect. Carter gave a slow nod. As long as we both keep things clear, he replied. We may not be alike, but we're not so different that we can't find common ground. Just understand that to us, survival isn't passive. With those words, he turned and strode back to his team, leaving Stha with a deeper understanding and perhaps a measure of caution. These Americans were indeed apex beings, prepared not just to live, but to thrive on their own terms, fiercely protective of what they had built. As she watched him walk away, Sikna felt the weight of what lay ahead. Captain Stha sat in her quarters, reviewing the plan. Her crewmates watched her with a mix of curiosity and quiet apprehension. Since arriving on Earth, the Zarai had observed Americans with a fascination that bordered on awe, but SNA had concluded that observation alone would not reveal the full depth of their apex mentality. Only by engaging them in a controlled encounter could they test the true boundaries of this uniquely human nature. Captain, I still question the wisdom of this test, RL said, his eyes reflecting the weariness shared by much of the crew. Americans have shown us their strength and resolve. Must we provoke them further? We must understand them, Sotha replied, her voice firm yet thoughtful. Without knowing the limits of their resilience, we risk underestimating humanity's potential and ours in response. This test is as much for us as it is for them. The plan was simple. They would simulate a minor threat near the Americans' encampment to observe their response. Sia's team would introduce a holographic projection of an unknown creature moving within the perimeter, something unfamiliar enough to prompt action yet not overly dangerous. If the Americans were as resourceful as they appeared, they would respond quickly and effectively, showing how they managed unexpected risks. As the Zarai technicians activated the projection, a creature materialized within the Americans' perimeter, a towering, snarling predator with clawed limbs and piercing eyes that reflected a false intelligence. It looked primal, something that would seem credible on Earth, yet trigger the American survival instincts. The hologram prowled closer to the camp, letting out a low, guttural growl. What do you think, at that moment, what should he have done? From her vantage point on the ship, Snow watched the American's reaction unfold with keen interest. Carter was the first to respond. In an instant, he assessed the threat, his instincts kicking in with a precision that reminded Stha of the finest Zarai strategists. Within seconds, he had signaled his team, issuing commands that balanced defense and offense in a seamless flow. Snow leaned forward, fascinated. Carter didn't merely react. He seemed to anticipate the creature's movements, positioning his team in a calculated arc to prevent it from advancing further. His demeanor was as steady as it had been during their first meeting, focused and intense. It's a simulated threat, RLYX reminded her, though his own gaze was transfixed on the scene below. And yet they respond as if it were real. Their commitment to survival borders on reflex. "Yes," SNA murmured, feeling both pride and a little awe at the effectiveness of their test. But watch what comes next. Carter isn't just defending, he's preparing to eliminate the threat. At that moment, Carter's team moved in unison, executing his instructions with practiced precision. Each member carried out their role without hesitation, their coordination almost instinctual. To SNA, it looked as if they had rehearsed the scenario countless times, yet she knew it was simply a testament to their training and unity. "Move closer," Carter ordered one of his team members in a low, controlled voice. "Contain it to the north." And the team moved as directed, their every step measured, their eyes sharp and unyielding. When one of them fired a warning shot near the creature, it flickered slightly, a glitch in the hologram that Carter immediately noticed. Carter narrowed his eyes, his expression shifting as he pieced together the truth. He raised a hand, signaling his team to halt. "This isn't real," he stated, his voice edged with suspicion and authority. "It's a projection. And if I'm not mistaken, our friends from the sky are watching closely." SNA felt her quills flatten in surprise. She had anticipated a swift response, but Carter's perceptiveness had outpaced even her projections. Carter was now looking directly up at her ship, as if he knew she was observing. "Well, Captain, he saw right through our little charade, didn't he?" "Well, Captain," Arwax murmured, an uneasy admiration in his tone. "It seems they've detected us." SNA felt an unspoken challenge in Carter's gaze, as though he were daring her to step out from behind her experiment. She made a swift decision. Turning to her communication panel, she opened a direct channel to Carter's location. "Commander Carter," she said, her voice calm yet firm, "it appears you discovered our test." Carter's expression remained impassive, though his tone held a hint of irritation. "A test? You mean this illusion?" "Yes," she admitted, respecting his resolve. "We sought to understand how you respond to unforeseen threats, how you adapt under pressure." Carter's gaze sharpened, his eyes flashing with a restrained intensity. "Captain Thaw, we don't take kindly to being tested. If you wanted to see how we handle danger, all you had to do was ask. Americans don't need illusions to prove their resilience." There was a pause, and in that silence, SNA felt the weight of her miscalculation. She had underestimated not just his perceptiveness, but the pride and integrity that defined his people. Americans, she realized, were not only capable of withstanding threats, they were built to defy them, openly, directly. "I apologize," Stha said, choosing her words with care. "It was not our intention to deceive, but to learn. We see now that your strength lies not merely in your actions, but in your refusal to yield." Carter's expression softened, though only slightly. "Apology accepted, Captain. But let me make one thing clear. Survival to us isn't a game or a simulation. We don't practice survival, we live it." Sikna felt the impact of his words resonate deeply, touching a part of her understanding she hadn't known was lacking. In that moment, she realized the full scope of what it meant to be Apex, an existence that demanded respect, that would not tolerate anything less. "Then you have our respect, Commander Carter," she said, her voice filled with a solemnity that mirrored her new understanding. "And our understanding." Carter nodded, his eyes holding her gaze. "Good. Because if there's one thing Americans won't stand for, it's being underestimated." As the communication channel closed, Salna sat back, her mind alight with a mixture of respect and humility. She had come seeking answers, hoping to understand what set humanity apart. But Carter had shown her more than resilience. He had demonstrated a fierce determination that redefined survival as something greater, something purposeful. In the silence that followed, Salna sensed a profound shift, a bridge forming between two worlds once divided by understanding. The Zarai had glimpsed what it meant to be Apex, and perhaps in time, they would learn not only to respect it but to embody it themselves. And with that, we have reached the end of the story, but stories don't end here. If you like the story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel so you receive all the new content. And if you have an opinion or something that caught your attention, leave a comment and let's discuss together. I'm waiting for your opinions, and see you in the next story. Bye.